Okay, so once again, good evening. Yeah, so let's go ahead and so today we're actually going to be looking at view model in Kotlin. Okay, understanding view model in Kotlin. So the last thing like 2 classes or 3 classes ago, we got to talk about the saving an instance, talked about the unsafe instance, and then talked about bundles. Okay, talked about configuration changes. How do we get to save data when the state of the app, has been altered, has changed? Maybe based on configuration changes, you move from portrait to landscape mode. How do we actually look into such scenarios? So we talked about that, and then we actually got to build an application that got to show how we can save state. So when you actually change the configuration, values are retained. Now, but another thing we also talked about was the fact that using that, you just get to save little amount of data. You can't save a lot. You can't save a lot, with that. So this is where the view model comes in. Okay, this is where view model actually comes in. So we'll look into that, and then let's get to understand what the view model is all about. Like, what is it really all about? Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, so understanding view model. Well, so to really get into that, we first of all need to talk about the application architecture. Okay, we need to talk about the application architecture. So basically, the architecture just gives you guidelines, okay, that helps you allocate responsibilities in your app between classes. Okay, just gives you what guidelines. How do I share responsibilities in my application? Okay, because you don't want one class, okay, doing a whole lot of things. So that's that. So how can I share it? These responsibilities between classes, just like we did in collaboration. Okay, instead of one person working on all screens, so how can we actually share it so that this person gets to do this person gets to handle this? So this actually, it helps you to scale your app, okay, and then to extend it with additional features in the future. And like we just talked about, it kind of makes team collaboration easier. So each person is working on several aspects of an application. Okay, not one person doing a whole lot of things. It can be very cumbersome and overwhelming. Okay, so that's basically what the architecture does. It gives you that guidelines, okay, how to really allocate responsibilities in your application. Now, the most common architectural principles that we have, there are 2. Now, the first one is what we call separation of concerns. Okay, first one is what we call the separation of concerns. Now, basically, this principle states that the app should be divided into classes, and each of them should have separate responsibilities. Okay, this is just self-explanatory. Okay, your app should have should divide them into classes and let each class have its own responsibility. Okay, so that's one of the architectural the most common architectural principles that we are going to be looking at. Now, the next one is to drive your user interaction from a model. Drive your UI from a model. So now, models are basically components. Okay, they are responsible for handling your application data. Okay, well, I've actually done stuff like this before for where you actually had classes, models for people who did the last some tasks, one of the tasks that we did. Okay, so models they are components that are responsible for handling your application data. Now, they are independent from views and app components in your application. They are independent. They don't depend on views. They don't depend on your views or whatever view it is. They don't depend on your application components. Okay, and because of this, they are unaffected by your application's life cycle and any associated concerns. So your on create does not affect them. Your on destroy, on pause, on resume, this whole thing does not really affect your models. Okay, they're unaffected by it. Okay, so now the main classes or components in Android architecture are what we call the UI controller. Okay, let me just so That's the main what class or components in your Android architecture are the what UI controllers, which is your activity and your fragment. User interface controllers, it's either your activity or your what fragment. But the main classes, they're not just this one. You have the UI controller, you have the view model, which we're actually going to be looking into today. We have live data, we have room, but we'll actually touch them one by one. Today is just for view model. If we can get into live data, we'll just run that. So these components they take care of some of the complexity of the life cycle, okay, and help you to avoid some life cycle related issues. So for the live data and room, we'll talk about it much later. So, but let's just concentrate more on the view model, okay? Now, let's just look into this now. So activities and fragments, they are UI controllers, okay? Now, UI is user interface. So what are UI controllers? UI controllers are basically, they control the user interface by drawing views on the screen. One. Secondly, they capture user events and anything else that has to just do with the user interaction, okay, that your user is going to interact with. So they draw your views on the screen, they capture user events, and then anything at all that relates to user interaction, okay, anything that relates to the word UI, okay, that is the UI controller is in charge of that, okay. Now, your data in your application, or maybe any decision-making logic about that particular data, should not be in the UI controller classes. You know, just like we've been doing our main activity and main activity class, and then we'll write code that adds two things, minus and everything. Those are logic, okay? So any data that is in your app or any decision-making logic, you should not put it in your UI controller classes, which is your activity and your fragment. So now the thing is this, the reason is that the Android system can destroy your UI controllers, which is your activity and your fragment, at any time, and based on your user interaction. Or maybe because the system can actually be slow. Low memory can actually make your system slow, which if you're handling logic in your UI controller, of course, it's going to really affect the performance. So, but the thing is, some of these events like low memory, okay, and of course, maybe how your user interacts, maybe they might just minimize the application and go to another application or do a lot of things or just move to landscape, a lot of things they can do now. Some of these events, you can't control it when building your application. So that's why you should not store any app data or state in your UI controllers. You shouldn't do that. Instead, your decision-making logic about data should be added to your view model. So you can see from here, I'll just say, look, your UI controller display data and capture user events. That's the only thing it should do. Your view model should hold all your data that your UI needs and prepare it for display. Okay, so let's talk more about the view model. I've talked about the UI controller. So now the view model, okay, it's a model of your application data that is displayed in the views. Okay, and we said models are components that are responsible for handling data for an application. That's basically what models are. They are components that are responsible for handling the data for an application. They actually just allow your application to follow architectural principles. Okay, like driving the UI from the model, which is a principle. Drive your UI from the model. Let the model be the driving force for the UI. Okay, so what happens is this: your view model stores the app-related data that isn't destroyed when your activity or your fragment is destroyed, or when it is recreated by the Android framework. So it stores that app-related data. Okay. Now your view model objects, okay, they are automatically retained. So that means they're not really, like you said, they're not destroyed like your activity or your fragment. No. They are retained during configuration changes, and so that the data they hold, okay, is immediately available to the next activity or probably the next fragment instance, depending on which one you're actually making use of. Okay, so to actually implement view model, the only thing you just do is you basically just extend the view model class. Okay, so we're going to just practicalize it now. So to summarize, basically what I've just said is this: activities and fragments, they are what we call, they are categorized into the word UI controllers. Okay, they are responsible for drawing views and data to the screen. They draw it, they get the views, they draw the views and the data to display. They display that data for you, and they capture user events. But your view model is responsible for holding and processing all the data needed for the UI. Okay, so it should never access your view hierarchy. Like, for example, your view binding object. No, it should never access it, or even hold a reference to the activity or the fragment. You should not, because holding it, that means when it is destroyed, it's actually going to affect it. So that's enough. I think that's enough. That's enough talk. That's enough talk. So let's go into implementing. Let's go into implementing this right now. Let's go into implementing this. So I already created. Where are you? Okay. So I believe you can see my screen. Confirm. You can see my screen.
Can see it.
Okay, good. So, well, to actually make use of it, I've actually just added a dependency here. Android X, the lifecycle view model. So I just added this dependency. So, well, if you need this, well, you can get it online, but I'll still drop it on the description of the video so you can get that. So that's just what I added. So let's just go. We're just going to do a very simple application. We just want to test what we talked about. Okay. So this is it. We're going to, first of all, build an application the way we have always built it. Adding the logic to we're not going to follow the whole principle now first. So we'll get to see the difference. So let's do something. So in my main activity, well, before that, let's just do something. So for this text view, let me just give it a 1. Let me do something. Let's say 1. We basically want to just do, let's just see a simple, sorry. So let's just make those. Wrap content, please. Okay, so let's say now I want the top to, let me give my text here an ID. Sorry. Okay, so let's say display. Let's just call it display. So I want this to be the button, the top of the button should be to the bottom of display. Okay, that's fine. Then let's do the start of parent as well. I can actually just say to the start of display. Let's play around this. Then the end to the end of display also. Yeah, that's fine. So then let's say margin top of let's say 30 dp. Yeah, so that gives it a bit of space. So let's just close it out. Well, let's just follow so you get used to that. So let's say random number. Or fine, let's just say display. Okay, so fine. Okay, so we're good here. So let's now, okay, so we need the button. So let's call this submit. And then the text on the button. Let's also say so. Let me speak English. Randomize. Yes. Let's speak English. Okay, so want to randomize a number. That's interesting. Okay, so I think that's that. Can just, so let's just make this text a bit big. I think 20 SP is a bit fine. Let's make it 30. Okay, and then for some reason, I just want it to be bold. So this style. Yeah, so, okay, that's fine. So we can really see it. Okay, so this is fine. So let's now go to our main activity and let's just do something. So, so let me create a variable here. Let me save our number for num. A number, let's say number equals 0. So let's just give it, then what did I name that as? This, okay, so I'm not sure I activated view binding here, so permits me to use the normal find view by ID, okay? We're talking about view models, not really. So so let's save, let's call it, let's say submit, and the submit is of type button. You know what? Okay, all right. And then share find view by ID, r.id.button, r.id.submit. Okay, sorry, randomize. What did I call that button? What, I think submit was what, that was the name I gave it. Okay, good. Let's use that. So let me say submit. Let's do set. What am I doing? Set on click listener. Okay, so basically what we want to do when you click on the button, we want to kind of increase this. Yeah, that's basically what we want to do. Just something simple. So after increasing it, then sorry, you also need to get the, should use a val actually, not like you're changing. So let's say display, which is going to be of type text view. Okay, and then find view by ID, r.id. I think display was the name. Yeah, so after incrementing it, we now want to set this set. So display dot text, and then it's going to now be equal to number. Of course, number is an int, so we need to convert it to string. Okay, so that's actually that. So let's just see. Let's see what this does. Of course, let's just make sure that it works. Let's make sure that it works. Okay, so that's running. So let's see. Okay, so so while that is running, so basically someone should be able to tell me what the results will be now. So what do we, of course, we shouldn't have any errors. So let's see. Okay, so randomize. So when I click on this, 2, 3, 4, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the rest. So now let's change the configuration. So it goes back to 1, right? And then can increase, and then moving it back, it goes back to the default. Okay, so this is what we actually want to. This is what we want to solve. And apart from even going to the default, so let's solve this problem. So we don't want to use what we used before, having to use on save instance, bundle, and the rest of them. So let's now implement this using a view model. Okay, so using view model now, we're going to now create. So remember, we said that the logic and everything should be removed from your UI controllers. Okay, basically your UI should just draw data. It should just draw views. It should just draw it. We shouldn't have logic written in here. Okay, so before I take this out, so I'm going to create a view model for this. I'm going to create a view model for this class now. Okay, so the name of my class is main activity. So it's just going to make sense for me to say main activity view model. So this basically means that this view model is for this particular class called main activity. So probably if I had maybe for what we're actually working on, the authentication activity where we had a lot of files. So I could actually have an authentication view model, so that every logic that has to do with authentication will be in that view model. And then the various sign in, sign up, forgot password, and the rest, they just draw data from that view model. Okay, so let's create that. Okay, so we have this now. So what do we now do? So we said that we now need to extend the view model. So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to extend it. It's going to extend the view model. So extend view model. Yeah, so we have this view model, and of course we need to pass in our parentheses. So this is it. Now, let's now let's now do the actual logic in our view model. Okay, so that configuration change, whatever, it will not affect this. So let me create a, so let's give an initial value of 0, and then I'll now let me create a function that just does that. So what we are basically doing is a function that adds a number. So number plus plus. So that's basically that. Okay, that's basically that. So with this now, what do? I can actually now delete what we had in our previous code. So let's take this out. So this is basically doing what we want. Okay, so I'm going to just delete this guy, take this out. Okay, let's leave the button. Okay, we can actually leave the text view. We can leave the so this is a logic. So let's take this out. We also don't need this. Okay, so this is just we getting reference. So for now, let me just take this out. So let's just have this. So now, how do we now get to draw this data from this view model, from the view model we just created? How do we get to draw this data? Okay, so first of all, what we can do is this. Just say I'll just create an instance of the view model. So I'm going to say val view model. This is just the variable name. Okay, and then I'm going to call the ViewModel Provider class. Okay, now the ViewModel Provider class takes in a it takes in a ViewModel store owner. Okay, so basically the owner, we pass in this. Okay, we pass in this as the owner, which is this class. And okay, and then we now do .get. So what do we want to get? We now want to get the model class. That's a class that has the model unit. So I'll pass in the model class, and the model class is our main activity view model, right? And then we just do this class.java. So that's that. Okay. So with this, on clicking the submit button, I can now use this view model to get access to my add number method or function. And then I'll now display, which is the text field dot. So to update that guy dot text, I'll also use my view model to get the number. So the view model gets the number variable. So this number variable, of course, is this guy. So you can see this changes color because we have called it. And then I now have to do .toString. Sorry. So that is it. This is basically that. So do anything I think, okay, let's run this and then see what changes we have. This is just a very simple way of explaining view model. So let's see. Okay, so do we have to, we have to reinstall and start. Okay, so let's test this out. So, okay, we have this. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So when let's change configuration now. So it's not working. So this is it now. Let's see. So we're doing, there's something we're missing out. So we need to check. I'll check now. Let's see. So first things first, I want to take out this hard code. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, let's take out this hard coded listen here. Let's take out this hard coded stuff. Let's start with that. So we don't get to see one. Let's see 0. And then let's bring this back. Okay, so okay, so let's restart. Let's restart this application. So you can see it's still holding that 8. So still holding that 8, even after we change that. So that's kind of, so randomize. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So moment of truth. Let's see. Okay, so it's not working. So that means there's something we are missing out. Okay, so ViewModel Provider. Okay. So, let's add something. Okay, so let's try this now. Let's try this now. Come back here. No, okay, so it's best to Oh, did I just turn this upside down? Okay, let's still try. Okay, so yeah, we're missing something. So it's going back to 0. It's going back to 0, and then when we come here, it continues 6, 7, 8. So it's not like it's not storing. It is. It's holding that. It's holding the previous data. But now when we turn it, it's first of all shows us the empty stuff, and then this. So let's fix that. We can actually fix that. Who has an idea? Who has an idea of how to fix that? It's actually a very simple thing to do. Very simple fix. Very simple fix. So understand this first, okay? Understand this first. Let me rerun this. So you now get to understand what I want you to do. So this is it. I think I can take this out. I need to try something, but let's leave lifecycle owner first. Let's not. Let me be sure that that is actually okay. So this is what we have, and then when we start adding one, okay. So it shouldn't randomize is a very wrong word because we're not even doing a random number. That's a very wrong word. So sorry. Let me correct that immediately. Sorry. Shouldn't use randomize. Randomize is a very wrong word. So let me just change it from here. Let's say increment grammar. Okay, so of course I'll have to change it here. So increment and then also change it here. Right? Okay. No, it's fine. Okay, so let's run that again, please. Let's run that again. Okay. Okay, so that's fine. So apologies for the noise you're hearing. Okay, so let's increment there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now when we switch this, if you notice, this actually, the number disappears. We were at 4, okay, but the number disappears. Now when we increment 5, so that means it's actually holding that data. But how come when we now switch configuration change, this text view goes back to, sorry, how can I get back to the other guy? Okay, so how come when we actually now change configuration, the text view, okay, doesn't really show anything? So who has an idea about this? Who has an idea about it? Okay, oh, hands are already raised. Okay, Fola, Judah.
I think since it's recreating the activity, we need to find a way to make it show that stuff before it gets, because the button only just does stuff for when we click. So when the thing starts the activity, we need to find a way to make it show what has been saved.
Okay, that's a very good one. Fola, you want to say something also? Hello, Fola.
Yes, so
Your network
this
is
line display. Hello?
Yeah, come again. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay,
I can hear you.
display text. Now
Okay.
Line up before the onClick listener function. Display text up.
Okay, so I think I have an idea of what it is. So both of you are actually correct. So we kind of need to save. We need to get that value and save it. So yes, we'll do that before the onClick listener. So how do we do that? It's very simple. Very simple. So this is basically what we'll just do. So I'm just going to say, what is this thing? Okay, display. I'm going to say display.text. Okay, and what is it going to display? Give me the current, whatever the current number is. So I'm going to get that current number and display it. That's basically it. That's just basically what we should. That's basically what we should do. Yeah. So that's that. Yeah, good one. So let's now run this. Let's apply this now. And let's see. Okay, so it has actually just showed up. So it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we switch. We still have our 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then we go back, and then we still have that. So that's the beauty of what ViewModel. So you leave the actual calculations, the logic and everything, leave it for the ViewModel to handle. So we could even do, like, there's a lot of things we can actually do with the ViewModel. So this is where you store a lot of things. Okay, so instead of having to use, because you get to build more sophisticated applications that has to do with a lot of logic. Okay, so such logic, we don't leave it in that. It's not good to leave it in the UI controller. No, we leave it. The ViewModel handles that logic. The only thing your UI controller should do is just draw the UI. Okay, so do we have any question before I move on? Did I say move on? I'm not sure I'm moving on to anyway. So do we have any questions? Any questions? Do we have any question? Any question? Okay, so I believe we're all fine. We are all fine. Okay, so one more thing I'll just introduce before we round up. Actually, so that's basically that. Before we round up, one thing I'll just introduce is.
Sorry, please. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
So, does this mean for each of the, like, we have so many of these functions we want to bring into play? Do we create one view model to accommodate all the functions? Let's say we have multiple screens, like in the other previous projects that we've worked on, and each of those screens have their own separate, algorithm, so to say, that we need to put in. Can I put all of them in one view model, or do I have to create separate view models for each of those?
Okay, so well, it all depends on what you're actually working on. Like I gave an example of authentication now. So basically, authentication has to do with maybe sign up, sign in. Probably you can add forgot password. You can add what else? I think basically those three. Okay. Now, the logic for them, they are kind of similar. So you don't really need to have view models for each of them separately. No, you can combine them to use one view model. Okay, but you can, each class can have its own view model. That's just it. Each class can have its own view model, but you just have to now, like I said, you have to actually just structure your code in such a way that it kind of looks, it's just easy to read and understand. So, and it's not cumbersome. So if you can have one view model that kind of captures probably 5 to 6 classes, it's still fine, but they should relate. That is just the thing. They should relate. So just like having one view model for authentication. So you have a code that checks for signs up a user, that has a code for signing up. You have a code, one function that sorts that out. You have another function that sorts out the signing. You have another function that sorts out probably if a user has forgotten his or her password and the likes. Or you have a function for social sign up, maybe sign up to Facebook, sign up to, so their operations are kind of what relatable, they're related. So they can actually just have one view model. And then you have another class that does something else. So of course, one class, the fact that we have started talking about fragments, okay, one class can actually have 5 to 6 fragments that does something that's related to that. So you can actually have one view model for that too. So it's all depends on how you want to structure your project, but it's structure it in a way that it's easy for one to actually know where to go to when he or she wants to understand your code. So if I just go to authentication view model, I know, okay, fine. This view model, what the logic I have here is basically everything that has to do with what authentication. Okay, so for example, if you have an application that displays notifications, okay, I just know that, okay, fine, notification view model, everything in this view model has to do with what? Notifications, to display notifications and the likes. Okay, if you have, probably you are building an application, a food ordering application, and then one of the things is how people make orders and everything. So order fragments and everything that has to do with order can be in a view model also. You can actually just put everything, every operation in a view model. And then every class or screen that has to, every activity rather, or fragment that has to deal with order, just draws that data, from there. Okay, so I hope that actually answers your question. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So any other question? Any other question? Okay, so yeah, I wanted to just do one more thing. Okay, so there's one thing you should also try to do whenever you're using your view model to override. There's a function you should override. I've actually met someone who said this is not compulsory, but I think it is, and I think I'll try to explain why. So the function is just, to override the uncleared function. Yeah, to override the uncleared function. Now, basically, the reason we actually have to do this, okay? Now, this, whatever you actually do here, okay, this is not compulsory actually, but depends on what you're working on, okay? What you're basically saying, okay, fine, before this function is called, probably I want to do something, and this function is called before your application process is killed by the Android operating system. That's when this uncleared function is called. Okay, so probably you might want to do certain things before the uncleared function is called, the view model class. You're free to actually make use of that. You can do a lot of things, whatever it is, depends on your own implementation. Okay, so that's basically that's for view model. So in conclusion, okay, we said one of the things to just note. So your view models should not hold a reference to activities. It should not hold a reference to fragments. It should not also hold a reference to, it can actually hold a reference to application context. It can. Okay, so we'll talk about some of all these things as we move forward. Okay, so we talked about the view model class, and we said they hold and they manage the UI related data, and they actually do it in a life cycle conscious way. That's actually that. Okay, so finally, do not store a UI controller or a context directly or indirectly in a view model. Don't store it. Okay, don't store probably an instance or whatever maybe an instance to a fragment, or maybe try to do whatever equals to main activity class. If you want to get an instance with store, no, don't do that in your view model. So that's basically that's basically that. So in the absence of any question, I think this is where we will round up for today. Yes, this is where we'll round up for today. On Thursday, we're going to look into two things at the same time. We're going to look into basically just going to look into we'll look into live data. Yeah, look into live data, and then we'll now look into shared view model. So that's what we were talking about, how shared view model, maybe two classes using one view model. Okay, but we'll actually just do that on Thursday. So Thursday session might be a very, well, let me not say long one. We'll just get to use up the 2 hours that we actually that's been allocated to us, but I want to just draw the button here. Okay, so so yes, that's basically that. So finally, do we have any questions before I actually stop that? Okay, so in the absence of any question, I think this is where we'll call it a night. Yeah, yes, this is